Hey, Kate, what did you eat last night?
I made cauliflower fried rice.
Nice. I have not done that yet. After all the talking, I still have not done it.
It is so good. It's so good. All that it is there's so little in it. My friend Carrie made it for me once, and it was so tasty. And I kept thinking that can't be. As I was watching him make it, there was no onion and no garlic. And, well, there was some no, I don't even think he had scallions. Maybe he had scallions. But it's just sesame oil and I think there might have been some scallions and peas and carrots, frozen peas and carrots, which I've discovered from Whole Foods are delicious as compared to those cubed ones that I've seen everywhere else, which I don't care for.
Those are terrible.
Yeah, the ones from Whole Foods are really delicious, and so they're really great. And then riced cauliflower and I think tamari, and then the egg. You make a little omelet and slice that up and put it in there, and that's it!
What's the flavor of the cauliflower when you chew it? What's the texture?
Well, it's riced, so I do that in the food processor, so it's in tiny crumbles. And then you cook it until it's soft. So it's not, I don't know how to answer the texture. It's not.
Is it toothsome as rice?
It's not chewy.
Okay.
So rice can have a little chew to it, and I'm used to brown rice, which is what I usually eat, which has a chew. So it's not really chewy. It's a little bit mushier, but it's probably closer to white rice, which I don't really eat much of. But it's probably still a little softer than that. And when you eat it the next day, it's definitely softer. It's mushier. But yeah, so there you go.
Nice. I really need to do that.
Oh, it's so good. You could probably toast it if you wanted to, because I've toasted cauliflower rice in the oven before and it gets crispy. So that's different. Yeah. How about you? What did you have?
I had a crab and corn flatbread. It had crab meat. It had roasted corn. It had local cherry tomatoes. And then it had a cheddar sauce. It had Barber's cheddar cheese, which is a really special type of cheese. Have you ever heard of Barber's cheddar?
No.
So I didn't know what it was at the time when I ate it, but when I got home and looked it up, it says it's aged for a minimum of 20 months in wooden boxes. And it's a high-intensity cheddar that retains a smooth, creamy texture with nut and fruit flavors. And it's made in a village just outside Cheddar, England.
Oh, okay.
And that was served with a cilantro pesto. So I just thought the combination of this really great cheese with the cilantro pesto and then the crab, which was just so sweet on top, boy, did it make me happy. And it was just served on this really sort of thin flatbread. Delightful.
See, I always thought that you're not supposed to have fish and seafood and that crab and cheddar cheese would not go well together.
I am going to generally agree with you. Now, that's not my instinct to want it together, but there are many times at the beach when I will have crabby, cheesy French fries. So they have French fries and they pour them with this crab meat and French fries, and it works really, really well. And I also think it's so crazy because something like that particular recipe, it's always so crazy because, crab meat's so expensive and then you just crap it up with cheddar cheese.
Yeah.
But what I liked about this...
right, it's high-end cheddar cheese.
Thank you, Kate. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yes, this is the way to do it. Yes, this is it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of You Won't Believe What I Ate Last Night. I'm Rick.
And I'm Kate.
And this is our ongoing conversation about food, health, weight management, and our endeavor to be and stay healthy in a really tasty world.
With love, kindness, and compassion towards ourselves and others.
And before we go any further, we just want to remind you, rate and review us when you're done with this episode. Tell us what you liked about us. Tell your friends about us. It really helps other people locate us.
And for those of you that have already done that, thank you so much.
Yes, we really appreciate it. Well, today we are talking about something that's very controversial between the podcast hosts.
What will they say? What will they do? How will it work?
Oh my God, Kate and Rick, there's controversy. Kate and Rick, there's controversy. I wouldn't say controversial, but definitely we have strong views. We're talking about fish today. And I would like to start us off by asking Kate a very probing question.
I'm ready.
Kate, do you like fish?
Rick, I do not like fish.
And that's the episode. See you next week.
And scene.
Now, Kate, may I ask, Did you always not like fish? And why don't you like fish?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there is a little mystery. It is shrouded in mystery, as am I, an enigma.
The devoured legacy lives on.
So apparently, when I was a little kid, I did like it. And my father told me that I used to steal shrimp off his plate as a little kid. And I feel like I have one of those tiny, very small child memories of eating shrimp and liking it. So apparently it wasn't always an issue. My mom didn't love it. She likes it more than I do, but she never loved it. And so growing up, she didn't like it. And I think I tended to align with her when I was younger. So that might have had something to do with it. My father blames two very distinct incidents on my turn.
The scenes of the crime.
That's right. He claims that two things happened. One is he made frozen fish sticks one time for dinner that were apparently disgustingly fishy and just terrible, and they smelled gross, and they were like just the worst kind of frozen fish sticks. And my father was a huge lover of seafood, and he said even he thought they were disgusting. And so I ate those and was completely repelled. And then somewhere around the same time, I was around 7-ish, I stayed overnight at a friend of his from work's house named Vera. And I loved Vera. When I would go to work with my dad, I would hang out with Vera. She was a pathologist. She was so cool and really fun.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, and she had kids that were, I think, one older than me, one younger, somewhere around there. So I went, my dad needed childcare because he was out of town or something. So I went and spent the night. I think it was just one night. Maybe it was a weekend, but I think it was one night at Vera's house. And first of all, Vera's house was scary because they had a spanking paddle.
A spanking paddle?
Hanging on the wall of, I want to say, the kitchen. This was new to me because not only did I not get spanked, like I didn't even have chores. You know what I mean? So the idea of corporal punishment and it being like just there all the time as some kind of presumably deterrent against bad behavior. I mean, I was freaked out by the spanking paddle. And there were other things that I won't go into that are not so pertinent. But so she served spaghetti with shrimp that night. And I now know that the shrimp was not very good frozen shrimp to begin with. And it was terribly overcooked because it was squeaky and it popped and it was super fishy tasting.
Wow.
And I can remember it in my teeth, like rubbery, just, ugh.
To this day.
To this moment, yes, I'm feeling like a little, that little bile kind of raising in my throat just thinking about it. And because of the way they ran their household, I had to eat it. I was forced to eat it. Oh,
no. And that spanking paddle's looming over you. That's
right. And I was like, I want to say 6, 7, 8, maybe 7 probably. And so I wasn't going to, you know what I mean? I was a good kid. I did what I was told pretty much. And so, but I also wasn't used to being made to do anything, much less eat something I didn't like. So it was all very weird. So it was traumatic on top of being disgusting. So apparently those two things in pretty close proximity sealed the deal for me. And I really, really, really loathe it. And I have tried other people's fish for my whole life trying to like it because obviously it would be really handy to like, as we will get into more about why it would be good for you. Raw tuna is the closest I've come to enjoying in a sort of, sushi preparation with ginger and chilies and garlic and, all that. So that's the closest I've come. But I can still only have a couple of bites and then it grosses me out. I'm okay when it's hidden and stuff and I can't tell. I know I've eaten things that I've subsequently learned had tuna in it or something. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I know there's fish sauce in Thai food, which I love. And as long as I can't taste it, I'm fine with it. So I don't have I'm not allergic to it or anything. I just find, and then the other thing was when I grew up in Baltimore, as you know, and there were crab feasts. That was a common party theme. Mm-hmm. So middle school and high school would be these crab feasts where we would be at a big picnic table and someone would just arrive with a bucket full of crabs that had been coated in Old Bay seasoning and whatever and just throw them on the table and people would just dive into them and rip these things limb from limb and suck their bodies out of the shells covered in just bits of crab and stuff. And it was the most revolting thing I had witnessed at that point to date. So that probably didn't help either.
I'm thinking, no, that didn't help. Well, that's good to know because I knew about the fish stick story. I didn't know about the Vera story.
So, not a fan.
Not a fan.
Not a
that
fan.
Makes sense.
No. No. And yourself?
Well, it's interesting because going back to my childhood, my mom always made fish on Fridays, and it was a white fish, and it was in some type of butter and I think wine sauce or some type of butter sauce. And it was just in one of her Cornell baking dishes, all these fish fillets laid flat, just in a little bit of like that yellow buttery sauce. And so looking back on it, I thought, oh, that seems really good or should be good. But I remember never being able to eat it. And I remember it being the first time in a meal that I would try to sneak the food off my plate into a napkin because I didn't want to eat it. So this went on and on and on for a long time. I don't know how long. And she eventually caught on what was happening, that I wasn't eating it. So being the good mother she was, she actually went out and got me fish sticks. Because she was determined I was going to eat fish on Friday because, it was a Catholic thing. So it was really important to her. So she made the fish sticks, and I loved them.
That's sweet. Well, to be clear, my father loved them too. This was a really bad package of them, apparently. Right. It wasn't any old fish sticks. So I didn't mean to denigrate fish sticks because I could see the appeal.
Yeah, totally. And so it's fish sticks, and then there'd be small square fish patties that would be really similar to like fish fillet, fried fish fillet things you get on sandwiches today. And I loved it because then that's where I really learned about tartar sauce, because she would bring out tartar sauce. I'm like, what? I can dip something fried, something baked in something really sweet and tasty.
And creamy.
I'm all in. Because if you get enough tartar sauce on it, you're not tasting the fish. You're just tasting the really hard fried bread element. And you're good to go.
Yes.
Yeah, so cut to several years later where in 95 I stopped eating all animals. Mainly because I was made a really disgusting meal. It wasn't a particular moral high ground. But now, over the last several years, even though I still don't eat meat, I've come back to eating fish. And I've done it really slowly, and I still eat it. And I always reach a threshold with it where I can't eat that much of it because I like it, and then it stops. And I'm always like, okay, that's enough fish for a while. Sometimes I can eat a lot of sushi, but that's about the most I can eat.
Now, are you using fish and seafood interchangeably in that statement? Are you using fish to mean fish or fish to mean seafood? Because I think fish. I sometimes use them interchangeably.
I use fish. In this particular conversation, I'm using fish to mean fish.
Okay.
Yeah, just like fish fillets, fish, obviously raw fish. Well, why should we eat fish, Kate?
Well, it's good for you, according to some people. One thing I have learned from doing this podcast is everything I look up, there are articles for both arguments. Like for every article that says it's good for you and you should eat it, there's another one that tells you it shouldn't. And for one of them that says it's low in saturated fat, another one says it's high in saturated fat.
Yes.
And, without delving deeper, which for our purposes I haven't today, it's a little bit hard to see. But obviously the big thing, we can all say it together, is the omega-3s, right? That seems
lovely
to be
omega-3s, yeah.
The biggest thing it has in its favor that something like chicken, for example, doesn't have.
Right. Totally. And this whole idea that as far as a protein source, for me, fish is a very easy protein source to get access to. And it's what they always consider a clean protein source, right? It's not going to be high in the really terrible fats. So long term, it's really good in relation to your body, in relation to heart disease.
Yeah, although salmon is really high in saturated fat, right? Some of them are.
Yeah, some of them are. So one of the things I thought was interesting, so the fishes that I was reading that the fishes that are high in omega-3s tend to have some of the low environmental contaminants and, toxins in them. And some of those are going to be the wild salmon from Alaska, which is apparently really good, Arctic char, and mackerel, which I didn't realize. Is that mackerel is going to have some of the highest amount of omega-3s, but the lowest amount of toxins in them.
And any of the fish where you eat the bones apparently is really great in terms of calcium and vitamin D. Apparently there's a lot of vitamin D as well. So
yeah.
Does one eat the bones of a mackerel? I feel like you do.
I don't know. I can't remember if I've ever had mackerel, Kate.
Okay.
And the other good thing about when you think about eating fish is that the smaller the fish, the less likely it is to have a lot of contaminants in it because it's smaller. It hasn't grown as much. It's had a shorter lifespan and, swimming around in the ocean to be able to collect all those terrible contaminants.
Yeah, and back to in general why it's good for you. Apparently, it's also linked to reduction in autoimmune diseases, including type 1 diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis. It helps you sleep better. It has so much vitamin D, that might be why it's really good for your eyesight, apparently. It might help prevent and treat depression. And
That
I think,
thought
again,
was really interesting when I read
comes
that.
back to the omega-3s. And it's good for your brain. It's brain matter. It helps the gray matter in your brain and helps with like Alzheimer's and things like that.
Yeah, and the omega-3s are supposed to help with inflammation. Although I've never really noticed that when I've eaten fish. I've noticed it when I've eaten other foods, but not particularly fish.
And it's good for your heart. It may lower your risk of heart attack and stroke.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of, wouldn't you say, Kate, and what you found, that like the whole omega-3 thing, that's the one thing that anyone who likes fish seems to agree on. It's like the thing that's been researched the most. Is one article I was reading says is they've really gone to town figuring out this omega-3 thing that comes with fish. So I feel like there's a lot of confidence there as far as the added value of omega-3s. Do you agree or not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the only thing that's irrefutable.
Yeah.
It seems like when you look at a side-by-side comparison of something like chicken and fish, and when I say chicken, I mean lean chicken breast without the skin. So something that would be comparable. The protein is comparable, although some people would say if you're trying to build muscle mass, that chicken is a better protein than fish for that. It might have slightly more protein. And some fish has more fat than chicken, some doesn't. But clearly it comes down to the omega-3s. And so the ones that are highest also, so wild salmon, Arctic char, mackerel, sardines, sablefish, anchovies. That was the one I wanted to talk about.
Right, anchovies.
Which I have tried. My mother and I, oh my God, we tried to melt an anchovy into our pasta sauce a couple of years ago because everyone says to just stick one in there and no one will know. And we had to throw out the whole thing because it tasted like fish.
Oh, no. That's funny. I would never have said that. I feel like a little anchovy goes a very long way. Now, my sister could pile one anchovy on top of the other onto all of her stuff and just plow away. But I just like a little bit. I just like to be able to taste it.
Yeah. Well, theoretically, if you just use a little bit, then you can't taste it. Because I know that there's anchovy in Worcester sauce, for example, which I can't tell is in there. I've probably had Caesar dressings that had it in there.
Definitely.
And not known it was in there. I mean, I tend to avoid Caesar generally because sometimes you can tell it's in there. But, like I know that I've had sauces and things where there's just this richness of flavor and it doesn't taste like anchovies. But
Yeah.
we failed at that. So
I was also read that farmed rainbow trout is high in omega-3s, as is albacore tuna, specifically from the U.S. and Canada. I couldn't find anything to support that. I'm like, what particularly about the U.S. and Canadian tuna makes it high in omega-3s?
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, do you know what I was thinking of when I said mackerel? I was thinking of herring.
Oh, herring. Yes. I have had herring. I had herring when Helen and I were in Croatia.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Sardines
Copenhagen.
and herrings
I'm sorry.
are really
It was
good.
Copenhagen because they always had those fish fests going on in every restaurant.
Yes. Yes. Apparently those are just if you can tolerate sardines and herring and stuff, apparently it's one of the healthiest things you can eat.
It was tough. We were sitting in a restaurant and the bar was right across from us. We had to get out quickly because the smell was so strong.
Yeah, man, I don't mind the smell of fresh fish at a fish store because if it's fresh, it doesn't smell bad. It's when it's fried and it mixes with those fat particles and it hangs in the air and it gets in your clothes, and that's when I just can't tolerate it.
That's such a funny thing because one of my favorite authors and writers that I follow on the whole fish thing is Paul Greenberg. He has two really great books. The one book I read was called American Catch. I can't remember what the other one is, but if you look him up, you'll find it. So in his research, he talked about these focus groups and all these focus groups that were done. And he said, the question to the focus group is, why don't you eat fish? And the three consistent answers were always, I don't know what to do with it as far as preparation. I don't want to touch it. And I don't want it stinking up my kitchen.
Those things are true.
Yeah.
I have a little list of ones that apparently have the highest levels of mercury. So we haven't gotten to that yet, but that's obviously the big downside is a lot of fish has just a bunch of garbage in it.
Yes.
And mercury perhaps being the biggest culprit, but also just antibiotics and chemicals and just trash and poop and just all kinds of other stuff.
And before the podcast, we were talking that we're probably going to go lightly on this because, we do these podcasts all the time and we do all this research, and sometimes we can get a little heavy-handed with just how terrible some things are and how depressing that it makes you not want to eat anything. I was just telling Kate, like I said early in the podcast, I slowly come back to introducing more fish back into my diet over the years, and it's really hard because whatever low threshold. But after doing all this research, I think I'm sort of done.
The way you said it, though, I have to say what he said because it was so funny. He's like,
it?
my hopes of incorporating more fish back into my diet again are dashed.
Totally. Particularly when you read about the farming and how everything's farmed and how the animals are handled. It's exhausting.
Yeah. And just because they're not cute doesn't mean they can't be unhappy.
Dude, totally, right? And this goes back to the thing I said earlier, is that I became a vegetarian because I would just had eaten something really terrible. Over the years, it morphed into a immoral high ground, right? That I didn't want to deal with animals at all. And I thought, somehow I'd rationalized in my brain that fish were okay because they're not the cutest animals, right? You don't hold them, you don't pet them, although I know some people do. But now that's all sort of shot to heck when you sort of realize that fish can and do suffer just as much as all the other animals, even more so because a lot of research is most people think that fish aren't as sensitive or charming or as cute as other animals. So there's no possible way they could possibly suffer as much as a cow. Such a bummer.
Exactly. I've always been intrigued by the fact that pescatarian is a thing, whereas we don't have a chickentarian. Like, you don't have somebody that's like, I don't eat meat, only chicken. I don't eat meat, only fish. Like, it's still an animal's flesh. It shouldn't be different. And yet somehow societally it's different. And I think it's because fish are kind of creepy.
Totally. That I get. When I was looking up the word, it seems to have come about in 1993 because vegetarian was really big during the 70s. Then somehow fruitarian came along. And then somehow they think all the fish people coined pescatarian, obviously from the fish word meaning pet. How do you say pesh?
Pesce or
Pesce, yeah. The other thing that happened is Kate got to visit a friend who actually raises tilapia. This is pretty cool.
All right, I am here with Bill McBride in Matfield Green, Kansas. Is that actually where we are? Yep. And Bill actually raises tilapia in his house. So my first question is, why did you choose that fish of all fish? Why tilapia?
Tilapia are pretty tolerant of temperature fluctuations. So it was either catfish, tilapia, or let's see what else. You could actually have multiple kinds of fish, but the really durable ones are tilapia and catfish.
Okay.
And then tilapia, I think, are more temperature tolerant, and so it's just a good choice for a beginner, I think.
How do you raise them? Like, what's the process? Do you just put them in water, or is there more to it than that?
Well, it's an aquaponic system, so I have the fish basically fertilize the plants, and the plants clean the water and give it back and pass it back to the fish. So it's a circulating
How cool is
system, and so it takes a while. You've got to set up the system and get the water going until you can realize that there's certain bacteria in the water that would eat the fish waste.
Oh.
And so once that bacteria gets set up, then you can add fish. And then you have to measure that every once in a while to make sure things aren't getting out of balance.
Okay.
But it's once you get going, it's pretty stable.
And do they just procreate and keep?
Well, they're supposed to. This was my first generation of fish, and they didn't procreate. I thought they would, and so I'm going to have to figure that out.
So you're still basically buying them? You just keep them fresh?
No. I mean, I bought 50 fish, and we've harvested probably 20 fish. Some died. I've got a few left.
Okay.
So I was hoping for a new generation naturally, but they haven't come. So I'm going to have to buy some more fish and try to figure out the delicacies or the intricacies of letting them breed.
So they can become self-perpetuating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. So apparently the ones here, let's compare lists on what I have and you have for the highest levels of mercury and the lowest levels of omega-3. So this is the list of fish to avoid. I've got canned albacore tuna, halibut, king mackerel, sea bass, shark, Spanish and Atlantic mackerel, swordfish, tilefish, and tuna steaks.
Oh my God, that's way more than I had. But I have all mine were on that list.
Mm-hmm. So lucky for me and the rest of you who don't eat fish or seafood. I get that a lot. I'll be like, I don't eat seafood. And people will be like, well, it's not seafood, it's just fish. So there is apparently a distinction. And I do tend to use them interchangeably because here I am talking about shrimp and crabs and stuff too. But
remember our hero from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Andrea Martin, when the vegetarian comes to dinner and they're like, he doesn't eat meat. He doesn't eat meat. She's like, oh, you don't eat meat. I make you lamb.
Yes. I can't tell you how many times they were like, well, it's only a little bit of bacon for flavoring.
Totally. And
okay.
And I got that a lot as a vegetarian. You know what I mean? There's just says, oh, it's okay. It doesn't have steak. Chicken's okay. Like, it really has taken people a long time to figure out, for people that don't eat stuff, what constitutes meat or chicken or fish.
Yes. And I still will go to restaurants, and in the vegetarian section of the menu is all the seafood.
Totally, Kate.
Fish is not a vegetable. You heard it here first, people. Fish is not a vegetable, in case you were wondering.
But Kate has her ways for you to get it.
That's right. Luckily, we can get it. So obviously one way is fish oil, which some fish oils are better than others. So do your research. And I'm never really confident about my information about supplements, so I'm not going to give you any suggestions here. But a good fish oil supplement should work. Mm-hmm. And I did have ones that had a lemon flavoring so that they didn't taste as fishy when you burped, because that was a serious problem for me.
I have mine in mint.
Oh, mint. Yeah. Even better. I've been told that if you put them in the freezer, then it keeps that from happening. But I did not find that was true, because once it warmed up in my stomach, it was the same result. So it didn't help me at all. So that's the first and most obvious one, is actual fish oil, which reminds me, I got to get back onto taking that. Then, of course, we have flax seeds. And I have flaxseed oil in my fridge now because I'm using it to season my cast iron pans.
Oh,
so
right.
I should actually cook with it. I've been saving it just for seasoning the pans, but I should cook with it. Interestingly enough, mixed greens.
What?
2 cups of dark leafy greens has your whole daily value of omega-3s.
Why are we doing this episode then? Let's just go eat salad. Let's do an episode on salads.
Totally. Canola oil has a little bit. It's not as much as flaxseed, but it's actually some. Walnuts are a big one. But again, a 1/4 cup, which is 1,000 calories. Not really, but it's a lot of calories.
Might as well be.
Is only 14%. So, it's still not that much. And of course, soybeans and tofu. But again, not as much. So I think flax is the biggest one. But apparently, this is the big eye-opener for me, is the mixed greens thing. If we can trust everyday health.
What do their ads say? Because, Kate, do you know that sometimes people try to tie facts to things they're selling?
Interesting. I've never heard of that. No.
Okay.
Well,
stick with me.
Luckily, I do not, they're not selling lettuce, so we're okay. Also, chia seeds is another one, and spirulina, but I don't like algae. I don't like anything green like algae and seaweed even, because it tastes like the ocean.
Yeah.
It still tastes like the sea, and so I just don't like things that taste like the sea, which is why I think partly why I don't like olives. I don't like dirty martinis, because everyone says they taste like the ocean, and I just don't. There's something weird. As much as I love salt, I don't like those. So there we have it. If anyone has any info about this mixed greens thing, let me know, because I find it a little too good to be true.
I agree.
But if I could eat 2 cups, because 2 cups, I mean, who doesn't eat 2 cups in a salad? Kale, spinach, and other dark leafy greens. 1 cup gives you 56% of your daily value, it says.
And you eat so much of that during the week anyway that you're bound to come close to hitting what you need.
You would think.
You would think.
Exactly.
Hey, Kate, can we review what the word fresh means in relation to fish?
I would love that. Can I tell you what I think it means? Because I didn't look this up. I only think of fresh versus frozen. That's the only distinction I make. Is there more to it than that?
No, but it's sort of interesting how it's changed. So basically, fresh used to mean fresh, meaning right out of the ocean. Like it came right to your plate, right? And no frozen has taken place. And we know there's very few places that can actually happen. That's sort of the fun thing about travel, where we're so lucky when we get to travel in Europe, is because a lot of those places, the seafood has come from the water that day. So that's how fresh started out. And then it really sort of morphed into this thing when the whole sort of industry around frozen fish really bloomed, is that fish comes right out of, whether it's the farm-raised fish or the fresh fish, and they all get flash frozen. So they get frozen there. And then once they're defrosted from there, they're like, oh, here's some fresh fish, right? A lot of times in stores, they'll say fresh salmon, fresh this. And generally what that means is it's been defrosted right after it's been flash frozen. So it's gone from being caught or harvested, as they say, to flash frozen. And then they're using fresh now in stores. So I just think that's an important distinction to make, to remember when you're in the stores and even when you're in restaurants now, you got to really ask, what does fresh mean? Because a lot of people are just selling you frozen stuff.
When my mom and I were in Greece one time, we went to one of those little fishing villages where the whole allure is that they catch your fish 20 minutes, it's on your plate, And so she likes fish enough that she was willing to give it a shot. So we went down and she got some fish, and it was that kind where the whole fish arrives on your plate with its head and its tail and everything. And they saw us coming, so it was like unbelievably expensive. We had American tourists written all over us, obviously, because they charged an absurd amount. And I tasted it thinking, if I'm ever going to like it, this is it. And I still was like, yeah.
Oh, bummer.
And I think she tolerated it, but she didn't really like it either.
Oh, that's a bummer, especially.
Yeah.
There's this nonprofit group called Oceana, and they did this study. Now, this is a big range in their percentage here, but they say roughly somewhere between 20 and 70%. I know, it's really not helpful, is it? I thought it was more funny than anything. Maybe incorrect. The fish may be incorrectly labeled in restaurants.
Oh my God.
As far as whether or not it's fresh or if it's the actual right species. So there you go.
Wow.
So this all comes back to a couple of things. Just remember where you are when it says fresh fish. If you're landlocked, chances are not so much, unless you're paying a fortune to have it flown in from somewhere.
Do you know what they call a fish with no eyes?
No.
Fish.
Kate DeVore.
It was my turn.
Did you just tell me a joke on this podcast?
I did. I just told a joke. I did. I love that joke because it intersects with my speech geekiness.
God, that's funny. Oh, I like that one. I like that.
Hey, did you know?
Hey, Kate, did you know that only 2% of the seafood we import gets inspected by the FDA?
I did not know that.
I was really bummed to learn that.
Huh.
Hey, Kate,
Yeah.
Did you know that shrimp is an ancient creature and they don't have much of an immune system?
Well, I'm not surprised, but no. Look at them.
Their coloring's terrible.
Right.
It's like orange. Their color's orange. I mean, my God, they could be president. Hey, Kate.
They're one step up from an amoeba. Yeah.
Hey, Kate, did you know that an average oyster can filter 50 gallons of water a day?
No.
Yeah, it sifts out all the algae
Wow.
and other debris. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Hey, Kate, did you know that New York City was the capital of oyster culture until the 1890s? And now it's illegal to farm or grow them anywhere in the state?
No.
Yes! Apparently, the whole harbor of New York was filled with oysters at one point. And anytime you went to New York, they'd say, make sure you have an oyster.
Really?
Yeah. And there's a whole other complicated story behind it, but the whole idea that eventually that the whole harbor got, because of industrialization or just people living there and making stuff, the whole water got polluted. It killed all the oysters, so they couldn't have them there anymore.
Wow. Hey, Rick, did you know that even though most fish reproduce by laying eggs, some fish, such as the great white shark, give birth to live babies called pups?
I did know that, actually. Yes.
I am shocked. I thought that was one of the whole definitions of mammal was live young. Like
really?
that completely messed with my whole schema for how
interesting.
the zootypes or whatever it is of like I was completely thrown by that one.
Totally. Interesting. All right.
Yeah. Hey Rick, did you know that sharks are the only fish with eyelids?
No, really?
Hey Rick, did you know fish communicate to each other using low-pitched sounds? They moan, grunt, croak, boom, hiss, whistle, creak, shriek, and wail. They rattle their bones and gnash their teeth. Because they don't have vocal cords, they use other parts of their bodies to make noises, such as vibrating muscles against their swim bladder to communicate.
Just kill me now.
Yeah.
No,
I
I
know.
gotta definitely stop eating them.
Sorry.
God, that's so amazing.
I know.
Like, that took my breath away, Kate. Hey, Kate, did you know that fish can change sexes?
No.
Yes.
All of them or just certain ones?
Well, here are some examples. The clownfish, wrasses, moray eels, gobies, and other fish species are known to change sex, including reproductive functions. Get this. A school of clownfish is always built into a hierarchy with the female fish at the top. And when she dies, the most dominant male fish changes sex and takes her place.
Get out. I just got weird goosebumps all over my body because, I don't know, there's some symbolism in there that makes me unhappy. But
Yes. Well, it's both wonderful, but I'm like, really?
yeah, exactly. It's like it's still a fucking man.
Taking a woman's spot at the top.
Yes.
And then when
I can do it. I can be a woman better than another female fish can.
and he probably gets the male salary at that point.
Exactly. Hey, Rick, did you know most fish have taste buds all over their body?
No, I did not. Really?
Yes!
I'm never really eating fish again. I'm ruined.
Totally.
Because what an amazing species.
Yeah.
Hey,
Honestly.
Hey, Kate, did you know that a lot of lipsticks contain fish scales?
I only know that because of researching this. But now I know that, yes.
Totally. Do you want to take it? Finish me off.
No, that's all I knew. I moved on.
It said some lipstick does contain something called pearl essence. It's a silvery substance is literally found in fish scales. It is primarily sourced from herring and can be found in many lipsticks, nail polishes, and other cosmetic products due to the shimmer effect it creates.
Well, I do enjoy a nice shimmer.
That's what I've heard about you, Kate.
And as much as I'm repelled by live fish, I like fish iconography. Like I have that basket in my kitchen with the metal fish handle and the rug I got from Mexico on the beach when you and I were down there has
Yes.
fish on it. Like I like fish as a concept because I do think they're amazing and magical. I just don't want to be near them.
Right, totally.
I don't even love aquariums. I don't like fish in the house. Hey, Rick, did you know that a fish can drown in water?
I did, only because of researching this episode.
Yeah, they need oxygen, so if there's not enough oxygen in the water, they'll suffocate, which is why it's important to keep your fish tanks clean. One of the many reasons. Hey, Rick, did you know the difference? So people sometimes get confused between whether the plural of fish is fish or fishes.
Yeah?
And it turns out it depends on how many different species of fish you're talking about. So if you're talking about 10 goldfish, you have 10 fish there. But if you're talking about 5 goldfish, 2 salmon, and a trout, you're talking about 8 or whatever, 7. I lost track of my numbers. 8 different fishes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So the Feast of the 7 Fishes is correct because it's 7 different fishes.
Fishes.
But if you were having 7 trouts, then it would be the Feast of the 7 Fish.
Right.
It doesn't have the same ring, but
I
yes.
had no idea, but I'm super happy to know that.
Hey, Rick, did you know the most poisonous fish in the world is the stonefish?
No.
And that its sting can cause shock, paralysis, and even death if not treated within a few hours.
Oh, my God.
Hey,
Tough times.
this just occurred to me right now. I didn't research it because it didn't occur to me till right now. What is that one fish? Is it a blowfish? There's some Japanese fish that only certified Japanese chefs can serve, and I think it's served usually raw as sushi, but if they don't prepare it right, it'll kill you. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about, but I do not remember the name.
Okay. But talk about drama.
It'll kill you.
Hey, Rick, did you know that sometimes tornadoes pick up fish while traveling over water and carry them over land where fish rain down?
I did not.
These fish showers have been happening for thousands of years. Roman writer Pliny the Younger describes this phenomenon in the 1st century AD.
I should have extrapolated my viewing of Sharknadoes 1, 2, and 3 and applied that to fish.
Hey, Rick, did you know that scientists have explored only 1% of the ocean depths, and they believe millions of other kinds of animals are still down there waiting to be discovered?
I did know that. It overwhelms me and saddens me both at the same time of the possibility and the lack of interest.
Yes. Hey, Rick, did you know that catfish have over 27,000 taste buds and humans have around 7,000?
No. Wow. All right. So, Kate, we talk a lot about compassion on the show. I've been thinking after all of this research on this fish, when I think about compassion, the only compassionate thing is to stop eating fish, to stop eating all animals. I mean,
terrible.
It's tough times. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do that, at least with the fish. And I'm not saying we should all do that. But when you really think about what I feel like I really got from today, particularly from the couple things you told me, and I'm just reminded of just that these fish are just as brilliant and amazing animals as other things. All the other animals that we see and the ones we can interact with on a daily basis. We all obviously love dogs, cats, horses. A lot of people have interactions with, and we understand their brilliant healing abilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. And then where does one draw the line? Because, dairy cows and egg chickens are probably not treated any better. So really, that leads to the only really humane possibility being veganism.
Yeah. And it also brings us back to something we've talked about before. It's just let's all just commit to being very clear about where we get our food from, right? Asking the right questions. Let's at least, here's what I'm thinking. I at least want to try and do the right work when I do buy fish. So I'm very good now about making sure that all the fish I buy, I know it's frozen. It's been frozen at a source. It's gotten here, and it's all wild. Like, that's one thing you can do. Is when you shop for fish in the store, get it frozen, and just make sure it's wild. Definitely better than farmed. That's what most of the experts would say.
And I know it's a pain, but I go to this trouble with my chicken and other meat. When I buy that, I insist on humanely raised, free range or whatever. And that's a whole nother episode. The chicken is a whole nother episode, which we'll probably do at some point. But it's a pain, and it's
more expensive.
It has value.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's a bit of a bummer of a note to end on, huh?
I think I'm going to have to re-edit that into the middle somewhere. Well, people.
That probably fits in.
When Kate and I were in Seattle, we got to visit Pike Fish Market, and this is a world-famous market where they're known for throwing fish. So basically, there's this big counter with the fishmongers behind it, and then in front of the counter, there are tables and bins with fish on these tables and in these bins, and then there's fishmongers milling about. So anytime a fish is sold, they pick up a fish and they start to throw the fish back and forth from the tables and/or bins to the counter and then back. And they throw it back and forth a couple of times, and then it finally gets prepared for the person that bought it. This is really fun. So we recorded this small moment of the fish throwing for you.
That is the sound of a fish being thrown back and forth between the fishmongers here at the Pike Place Fish Company Market. All right, well, know your fish, know where it comes from.
And as always, thanks for listening. Remember to rate and review us. And the strongest thing we have, which we've learned from our years on this podcast that's helped us grow, is word of mouth is really the best thing you can do. When someone says, any good podcasts, hey, yeah, recommend ours.
That's right. Exactly right. I'm always asked, any good podcasts? When that happens, remember this one. That'd be great.
Thanks for listening.
All right. Thanks. Bye.